All right, Liam, Micah, appreciate both of you guys coming on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks.
So, Liam, first one question I wanted to ask you. I know you get more of a golf background, but you are the founder of the Baseball Performance Lab. Like, what is the process like for if you have a golfer come in and like how do you know what clubs that they should swing?
Well, I mean, golf, we've been at it for a while. So, I think pretty standard protocol at most fitting centers would be first testing the player's current equipment, identifying their current ball flight conditions compared to optimal. And then, once we understand what areas there are for improvement, whether it's narrowing dispersion or optimizing distance, from there, we're able to start to make some educated selections of new products to test. And then of course go ahead and individually test each product, kind of refine it down where we want to go. And then especially with whether it's with drivers or with irons, then we get into the fine tuning, so tweaking loft by half a degree or face angle by a degree. In irons it'd be more fine tuning the lie angle of the club, and really just kind of trying to get each parameter of the golf club optimized for the intended shots that the player is trying to hit.
Are you measuring their like how long their arms are and like going over different physical measurements too to understand a little bit more about them?
Yeah, absolutely. So our standard, we're doing the same thing in baseball now. We'll go from middle knuckle to elbow, elbow to shoulder. We'll get wingspan. We'll get wrist to floor. And even those give us a pretty good idea of how the levers are going to work over the course of the swing.
You mentioned loft there, which I've heard a lot of people talk about that. Could you kind of explain like what loft is? Just because I think there's a lot of people out there who don't really know what it means.
Yeah, sure. So, a club with 0 degree loft would be, sort of like a vertical, perpendicular to the ground plane, and then each degree of inclination back from that would be considered 1 degree of loft. So for a driver, the club in the bag that hits it the farthest, the majority of lofts in play for amateur golfers would range anywhere from about 8.5 to 12.5 degrees of loft. We get all the way up to the pitching wedge, which should be the highest lofted club in a normal iron set, and that'll be usually about 46 degrees of loft. And from there, we get to the highest lofted club in the bag. The lob wedge would be, 58 to 62 degrees of loft. And so essentially the more loft on the club creates a glancing blow on the golf ball, which is going to cause a higher launch angle and more spin rate, both of which will cause the ball to fly a shorter distance and stop faster when it lands, have less roll.
Micah, is there any difference between what you do on the baseball side and what Liam just described when he's fitting someone for golf?
I mean, all the principal things that we do are based off of the way they did it in golf. That was a good blueprint that we've started with, and there's obviously some things that are a little bit different with baseball and golf, but in terms of just measuring the athlete, we follow the same procedure. And yeah.
No, I was just going to follow up, and I just wanted to ask, like, how do you equate for, like, obviously, I know you were a third round pick out of LSU and played professionally. And obviously, just how mental hitting is. And I don't golf. It's just sad because I live on a golf course. But how do you take into account when you're fitting someone, like what feels good for them? And maybe not be as optimal as it may not be like the optimal bat for them, but if it feels like, how do you go about that process?
Yeah, so part of the fitting process is we will take into account the subjective scoring of each swing, but also the bat. So at the very end, we'll see how they like it. We'll have them rank the bats at the end before showing them the results. It's pretty frequent that a player actually performs better with one of their lower scoring bats subjectively, and it's been pretty positive, the reaction. A lot of times they're like, you know what, okay, I've been feeling good about this one bat, but obviously it's not working. That's why I'm here. I'm going to give this other one a shot. The one thing, especially at the pro level, that is a little easier too, is being able to change the knob and the handle to fit their preference of what they like to feel in their hands, and that can also make that change a little bit easier.
Liam, what surprised you about going into the baseball world?
Ooh, I'd say the biggest thing that surprised me was there was no inferential metric to describe how one bat swings compared to another. That was a shocker.
Yeah, I know before we started recording, you guys are literally like the only people that I've really encountered who are doing this kind of stuff from like a science background, like science based, and it's amazing. I mean, I know you guys haven't been doing it for too long, but I assume that players probably from all over the country are coming to you guys to work to see like what bat they should be swinging based off of what's going to be optimal for them.
Yeah, I mean it's it's a pretty crazy list of players we've had the opportunity to work with. You know what I mean? A huge part of that is, right out the gates, being able to be partners with Marucci Sports has been, I mean, I don't know. Sometimes it feels like an unfair advantage versus, other people trying to do it. Because, I'm sitting here. I don't know if you can see some of the construction after the flood. There's, one of the durability cannons is right behind us. We've got their MOI and compression testers for all the metal bats. Our lab is literally just on the other side of this wall, and we're about 20 steps away from wood lathes. So, to be able to come up with some crazy idea, actually be able to make it happen, then test it, find out if it works or doesn't work, has been, it's been a huge leg up. I mean, quite frankly, I don't think I would have taken such a big step away from the golf industry if we didn't have such a strong partner to start off with.
When you're working with, as I know you guys do with stuff with wood bats and metal bats too, and Liam, I've heard you talk about how, like, because if you understand the BPI, the balance point index, a player can go from a 32 inch to a 33 to a 34 inch BB core and not change anything, from a technical standpoint, and their timing be the same too. Like, how did you come about like finding the BPI to begin with?
Well, it started with bad math that became better math. That's now good math. But it was literally early days, back up at our golf lab in Toronto with a bunch of production model wood bats, and we repurposed some golf equipment. We were building a database of the mass and physical properties. We just finished paying independent league players $50 each to hit these 8 bats in our motion capture system and on our launch monitor. So at this point, the only thing we knew was that, changing the bat would change performance. And so I called down to one of the guys at Marucci and just asked him. I was like, hey, how do I match this 33-inch JD20 to a 34-inch AM22? He kind of laughed at me and said, well, I thought that's what you were figuring out. And I was like, oh, okay. So, that's where, we just started to look at the properties of the bat. And, first thing we did was build a formula, and then, kind of subjectively test it with players and say, okay, hey, this, close your eyes. Okay. Here's an 80 BPI, here's an 85 BPI. What do you feel? It was pretty crappy. And then, got a little bit better. Was fortunate enough to pull in a friend of mine from the golf world named Dr. Sasha McKenzie, who's helped quite a bit. And, it's got us to the point we're at now where, when we're going through working with players, if we hand them a 33 and a 34-inch bat, and both BPIs are 84, 80% of MLB players literally can't feel any difference. What comes down to it, I guess, what we feel, as an athlete, we're swinging the center of mass. Right. And so, where that center of mass is like one of the most important things that people aren't talking about.
The scale is 0 to 100, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And then, but there's no, like, the higher isn't necessarily better.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the education points, is we'll get players go, okay, well, what's a good BPI? I'm like, oh, well, what's a good color? Or what's your favorite type of cake?
Yeah.
So it really is about, what works for the individual, and things we, think about. If you have a player with longer arms, and then you have a player with shorter arms and they both have the same bat. When we're swinging the arms and the bat, the center mass of all of those objects, kind of work in tandem. So oftentimes we have players with longer levers that are performing better with lower BPI bats, because it's almost like moving the center mass of the bat closer to the hands offsets some of the additional arm length that person has in proportion to their torso.
Okay, that's fascinating. I like that. Micah, when you were playing, because I had heard this before too. I mean, just recently, like the power hitters, they swing the end loaded bat, and like the guys who don't have as much power is more like evenly distributed. Like in your testing, has that actually been true? Is that actually factual?
No, not at all. I mean, to an extent, there's some, like, I guess, basic truth to the understanding of like a stronger player is going to be able to handle more end loaded, and therefore, because of that, maybe get more exit velocity or power or whatever. But I know as a player, before any of this was anywhere close to being out there, it was always that same thing. Like power hitters would use big barrel end loaded C243 model type wood bats, and then the contact guys would use like the little P72, like smaller barrel bat. And it's kind of funny because we're kind of tending to see the opposite being true of what bats players should be using. And then, like Liam was saying, it actually comes down to the physical build of the player more so than this. I mean, the strength obviously plays a part, but I mean, we've seen guys that are just crazy specimens of athletes that are swinging very hand loaded or balanced bats, and guys that wouldn't really scare you if they walk through the door swinging more end loaded bats. So
Is there any, oh, go ahead. Sorry. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just saying, is there any benefit? So there's no real benefit if I have a 33-inch 32 and I go up to a 34, 33 and swing it just as hard, just as fast. Like there would be no necessarily increase in power, exit velocity.
No, there definitely would be if everything else stayed the same. If my swing speed stayed the same, everything stayed the same, but the bat just got longer and heavier, that extra mass is going to add a little bit of exit velocity.
Well, I wanna jump in here for a second, because when you're making a length change like that and a mass change, there's going to be a significant movement in the center of percussion of the bat. So, if you also relocated contact point to center of percussion, yes, we'd see more exit velocity. But when you look at it's a very steep drop off of exit velocity as that contact point starts to move away on wood, right? It's not like the cool stuff that can be done with composite bats where you've got, a significant portion of the barrel flat that has optimum performance. Again, I think that's one of the things people need to consider a little more about wood bats is aligning their impact point, or impact pattern. Because I guess, I like to think we're not shooting a rifle here in baseball. It's a shotgun. But to the actual center of percussion of the bat will make the biggest difference.
Is it true or false? Because I heard this when I was playing. You always want to swing like the opposite side of the label. You want to make contact with the opposite side of the label. Micah, did you hear that too?
Yeah, no, it depends on the bat properties. With a maple, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where you hit it. Obviously, the barrel's preferred.
Yeah.
But yeah, in terms of aligning the label, it doesn't matter. With ash, though, it would. And then in that case, it's more about the grain than the label. I know they've been moving the label around for certain reasons, but with ash, you want to hit always with the grain.
Liam, this is going to be a question kind of actually for both of you guys in the baseball and golf world. In the golf world, can you objectively see, and have you been able to objectively see when you fit a player and then able to watch him and see what he gets, like just in terms of scores on the golf course, improve over time? And then the same thing with baseball for Liam, like once you fit a player, does it get better?
That's a fantastic question. So interestingly enough, there has never been an empirical study in golf that shows causality between club fitting and lower scores. So absolutely, we can see massive changes in ball flight, but there hasn't been a study done that actually quantifiably shows drop in handicap attributed specifically to clubs. I think in baseball, some of the things we saw this last MLB season were, more impressive performance changes than what we've seen in golf, particularly for athletes at that level. It's one thing you get a 14 handicap that comes in with a terrible driver fit and you optimize their driver, they gain 25 yards. You can expect this, maybe a 1 or 2 point drop in handicap, but some of the stuff we saw with MLB players having massive changes mid-season was pretty wild.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Mike, just one side, I just want to follow up real quick with Liam before I lose this train of thought. I don't know in golf, right? I know in baseball you play every day, right? There's games every single day. In golf, I'm sure these guys are playing all the time. Throughout the course of the tour, and the more they play, I assume that their body would break down a little bit. Maybe their swing would get a little bit slower, like it does at times in baseball. Would it be wise for them? Do they change clubs throughout the year?
Sometimes yes, where there's greater change, from week to week in golf is subtle shifts in club lofts. So if we take a look at a traditional week for a PGA Tour player, let's say they made the cut at the previous event. Sunday night is often a travel day. They'll, get in late Sunday night. Monday is usually a pretty quiet day. They may just walk the course. They may just go hit some balls. Usually Monday, Tuesday, players will be out there working with manufacturer tech reps or their coach and a launch monitor to just optimize their carry distances for whatever this environment is. So you start the season up in Napa, California. That's going to be a fair bit different than when you get to TPC Scottsdale than when you get to Torrey Pines in San Diego. So there's a lot of that. When we look at the actual forces exerted to move a golf club versus move a baseball bat, it's baseball bat takes about 2 to 2.5 times as much force applied to it in order to move it at what would be considered an elite MLB speed. So while there's, I think a golfer will take a lot more swings, I feel like golf is a little bit more advanced in terms of the recovery and maintenance that players go through over the course of a season. So I don't see as much wear and tear on the majority of golfers as I do on baseball players.
Okay. I thought that might be the case, but I was just curious. And then Micah, for you, I mean, I know you guys have worked with a few different teams and a lot of different professional players. Have you tracked how they've done before and after they've gotten fitted?
Yeah, so we tracked a few of the guys. We obviously had a shortened COVID year a couple of years ago, so we were only able to track those 60 games. We compared those players that fit through the off season to another 60 games at the beginning of this year, and I believe 8 out of 10 improved their offensive WAR by at least 0.2, and I think half of them by like over 1.
Whoa!
Like a full win above replacement offensively, which, if we do the math on how much that's worth, that's I think we're undercharging people. But
yeah, I was gonna say, Liam, you need to start charging more, man. If
we're trying.
So obviously small sample set, and in baseball, like, sample size is everything. So we'll get another, hopefully. Well, now there's a lockout, but hopefully we get another year to see some of those numbers increase. But I think what's interesting is, like Liam was saying, in golf versus baseball, that difference in how you're moving the bat and playing every day, traveling, all that stuff. Like we saw when I was at LSU, we actually tested all of our players one year on vertical jump the day of travel, or the day before a series at home. And it was funny, like the highest jumps as a team was the series we swept a team that was ranked and we were unranked. And then the one with all the lowest jumps of the team, like as an average, was a weekend we got swept. So when we're looking at that, it's like if we're not taking into account recovery with, like, to the same aspect that golf is, yet most of these guys are swinging the same bat all year. It's kind of crazy to think about that they're using just one bat.
Well, what about pitchers too, right? Like, what if I come to you, Liam, and I'm facing a guy who has 20 inches of a vertical break on his fastball today, and then tomorrow I'm facing a guy with 20 inches of horizontal break on his fastball, arm side run tomorrow. Would it make sense to have just two completely different bats? The movement types are completely different.
It does to me. And that's, Mike is sick of hearing this. I'll date myself again, but back when I was a kid, I was a pretty decent pitcher, loved just loved baseball. I was a geek who was studying and memorizing stats on the back of baseball cards, and looking back at it now, the only thing I know that couldn't be optimal would be using the exact same bat against Greg Maddux and Randy Johnson. Like just no way. Yeah, so those are the types of things that, with I'll say some of the more inquisitive players that we look at, yeah, it could be, it could be something like altering length but preserving BPI so they can match the sweet spot up with that horizontal break. It could be making a strategic drop in BPI of 6 to 8 points to catch that high spin fastball. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, we think golf would be hard with one club.
I mean, Liam, or do you guys get players who like come in and like ask those types of questions, or get multiple bats for, various times of the year?
Yeah. I mean, one of the first ones that pops into my mind was, a player that comes here once or twice every year, who had a specific request of, was it more vertical bat angle low in the zone? Is that
Yep.
what it was, Micah? Yeah.
Yep.
And so, we went through normal testing protocols, measuring everything as we went. This player is very strong, so his strength levels kind of overrode normal changes we would see by increasing BPI. But as we experimented with different knob and handle diameter, memory serves me correctly, we found that narrowing out the handle allowed him to achieve his goal because it gave him more wrist mobility.
Where does grip strength, finger strength play a part in all of this? Like, was Ted Williams right all these years of just, trying to squeeze a tennis ball like 9 million times a day?
Micah, you want to start with that one?
Oh, I would love to. Yeah, that's probably my favorite thing coming in, and it was something I was the same way, because I read Ted Williams' book a long time ago, and my dad had me doing grip strength just to be able to watch TV as a kid. So that was always a big favorite of mine. But yeah, it's interesting the correlations we see with grip strength, whether it's top hand, bottom hand, which one's stronger, if there's a big difference. But then also like we were talking about, I think a little bit earlier, it's like if there's a decrease in that because of an injury, I mean, that's pretty substantial. And I'm probably going to go ahead and say that you should probably be using a different bat. Whether that, I mean, it could be a gain or a loss in grip strength, either one.
What about the knob, right? You hear the axe for guys who have had some hand injuries. I mean, do guys come and do you guys make, are you guys, I don't know. I know for a while axe bat like was the only one who could make it. Can everyone make those now? The axe handle?
They have to have a license. So Victus does have axe handle bats. So we've had with one player in particular, we had a bit of experience working with the axe handle. We've done a little bit of testing on it. It's certainly for certain delivery types, it can change wrist angles and change things like vertical bat angle and bat path, for sure. Not always saying that's better, but it's different.
Liam, I've heard you talk a little bit in the past of hardwiring the brain for speed and recruiting motor units and things of that nature. And I find it fascinating, first of all. And this past season, one of the things that we would sometimes do for guys on deck, because I'm sure Micah knows this pretty well, is guys always have the donut on deck and it's really heavy, and then you take it off. Well, sometimes for the guys that were willing to take the chance, we would put an underload bat out there. So it'd be a lot lighter than their game bat or like a fungo bat, and they would swing that a few times and then go up to the plate. Is that the most optimal way to get those motor units firing right before an at bat?
I like that. Yeah, I'd be part of the outliers that like that kind of stuff. I mean, not that this would happen. Mike and I have talked about this a lot, but if I was to design the ideal on deck routine, I would probably have a trap bar and someone deadlift 325 pounds 3 times and then swing a fungo bat and then go.
Really?
Wow. Yeah. So like the heavy lifting would be like that potentiation. It's like lighting the fuse to turn the brain on, like, okay, I need to use every single motor unit that I've got in my body. And then the fungo bat's going to be like speed. Now go hit. It's like neural priming.
Micah, you think that's You think guys would be willing to do that? I've actually heard, I won't say the name of the team, but I've heard of one team who actually has done some stuff with like trap bar deadlift and things like that for guys in the hole before they went
Yeah,
on deck.
I know there's a specific team. It might be the same one that we were talking
Yeah.
to their coach, and he was talking about the same thing. But yeah, I mean, especially now with MLB clubhouses, how quickly those guys go in and out of the dugout. I mean, you could have something there in the hallway between, rep out a few reps of those, go grab a fungo, take some swings, and go up there. I mean, most of these guys are getting timing off on deck circle. They're not trying to swing like a heavy bag, go through a program. But yeah, whether that's okay, it's my turn to go hit, let me go grab a couple reps and then hop out there. Might get to that point one day.
I mean, where do you guys see yourself in, like, baseball performance lab in the next few years? I mean, do you think it's something where it's like more just well known, like you guys want to like open up other places like around the country so more players can come get fitted? Like, what's your vision?
Oh man, we're trying to figure that out right now. I think but ultimately I'll say the vision is that, in 10 years from now, I hope that 90% of the market or more is getting fitted for a baseball bat, however that happens. We always say it's the only piece of personalized offensive equipment, so you should treat it as such, and make responsible decisions as to what you put in your hands every time. We're currently in process of expanding our presence in Major League. We've got some new offerings that are going out to teams. So, like I said, hopefully there's a season so we can, learn about the viability of this stuff. A lot of it right now is we're just trying to get better.
Yeah.
Mike is sitting there in what's going to be our first commercial location. It's opening here very shortly, and it's really designed to give youth players the opportunity to come in and have access to the same level of bat fitting services and the same level of training modalities that we offer to MLB players. So, it'll be interesting to see if the market's ready.
If a player is at home and they can't get to you guys down in Louisiana, which, I mean, if you can, like, I don't know why you wouldn't want to go down there. I know I'd be down there for sure. But if they can't, and they're just like a 12-year-old kid, just a parent listening to this, how should they go about in terms of like, what's the simple, like, dummy down version of bat fitting? Just like swing it at Dick's in the Dick's store and see if it works or not.
That's a tough question. I can tell you what it's not. I can tell you it's not holding the bat out for 3 seconds. I can tell you it's not putting it on your chest and grabbing the barrel. I mean, I guess if I was to, okay, I'm trying to think here, putting my baseball dad hat on, if I didn't do what I do and I just had my golf background, honestly, you know what I'd probably do? I'd probably go into Dick's Sporting Goods, and I would probably take Dr. Scholl's foot powder spray and spray it on a few demo bats. And then I would buy whichever one my kid has the most consistent impact point with. And at that level, at least he's hitting it hard. And then if you hit it hard a lot, good things will happen. But it's tough when we're coming from the why guess when you can measure.
Right. Micah, would you say that's accurate? Would you do the same thing if you had a kid?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough if you can't get any kind of exit velocity, batted ball data, strength testing, any of that stuff. It makes it a little bit more of a guess. I would go out on a limb and say, or actually I would just say, email us. We can maybe see if we can get some info from you and help make that decision at least a little bit more measured. So
yeah, I mean, if you do a little bit of work, someone's really keen. I think, one place, if they were to give us vertical jump, seated chest pass with, depending on the age, 2 kilogram or 4 kilogram med ball, sit up and throw with a med ball, and grip strength, we could point them in a pretty good direction.
Liam, when you mentioned earlier about doing the trap bar on the on deck circle or in the hole, because obviously it probably wouldn't, having 300 pounds on the on deck circle trap bar would be pretty tough. But what about overload, underload bats to replace the trap bar? Because I mean, it's a heavier object, right? So wouldn't that be the same concept?
Yeah, I mean, that would be a, I think it would be, it would be probably a more practical solution. When I go to the deadlift, I look at, I just, not that a baseball swing doesn't recruit, total body, but, I think that static deadlift just really makes those large motor units light up and fire, and activate to then go swing whatever the weight of bat is. So yeah, the overload would work. I mean, I would probably lean towards grabbing 2 bats with heavy donuts on them and doing a few squat jumps instead. Again, I'm just looking at something that's a little more, I guess, not that a baseball swing isn't explosive, but I'd say feel like something at the start that's a little bit more of a linear movement can maximize the potentiation before we start to get into the rotary stuff.
You always mix in a weighted vest.
Ooh, I like
A
it.
weighted vest on, squat
Oh,
jump.
I like that. I like that. Micah, do you think that's realistic in a 162 game season for 600 at bats?
To do 3 squat jumps with a weighted vest on and fungo swings.
Yeah, on the on deck
Yeah,
circle.
I would say one of my favorite quotes from an ex-strength coach was, "Don't be afraid of the weight, be afraid of the reps." So if we're just repping out 3 heavy squat jumps, that's not going to tax you nearly as much as even if you're doing 100 body weight squats.
Mm.
I think, one of my observations, being a little newer into the baseball world too, it keeps coming in, is I think there's an opportunity for a lot of hitters to work smarter, not harder. I think a lot of the fatigue comes from overtraining, where guys have to get their reps in. And I feel like there's sometimes very little focus on what their reps actually are doing.
Yeah, I mean, the only golfer, the main golfer that I have heard of and have watched him do a lot of stuff is, DeChambeau, Bryson, who increasing speed, getting bigger, faster, stronger. I mean, I essentially, is that what you're talking about in the sense of like where I'm sure he's working really smart, increasing speed. Like I see him hitting golf balls in his house, million miles an hour, but I'm sure it's deliberate, right? I mean, I'm sure with his trainer, they're not just swinging just to swing. It's like there's certain reps and intent behind each one.
It's very, very purposeful, and so it has been focused on speed. So, that's why you see him doing the stuff he's doing. Going back to a baseball context, I think, if a baseball player was truly trying to train or maintain speed, I feel like over the course of a season, I feel like they'd be better off to probably do a lot fewer swings than what they actually do.
Is there a range? Oh, go ahead, Micah. Sorry.
I was saying, I think it's interesting. I feel like there's almost a curve to it where at real young youth levels, they don't hit a ton just because they're young. And then as they get a little bit older, they start repping up rep ranges, and they're in the cage hitting all day, doing with, like you said, no purpose driven work. And then it's funny because as they get to college and pro ball, I feel like those reps even start decreasing there because they realize it's about like what they're doing, not how much of it they're doing. And I think people would be surprised at how little big league level hitters actually hit in terms of total swings.
Do you think to get to that level though, they had to take all those swings to figure out what they needed to?
For sure, over the course of a lifespan, it takes. I mean, with the rule, the 10,000 hour rule, there's definitely some of that when it comes, especially with something that's hand-eye coordination related. What my kind of purpose behind all that is when we're at the amateur ages, we're taking all these swings with no reason, just because we think, oh, I'm doing a bunch of work, I'm getting better. Now, there's definitely a mental side to that I'm sure definitely helps. But when it comes down to what they're actually working on, I think we spend so much time in like that mechanical working on certain, like my hands need to be here, my hands need to do all that stuff. And we don't spend enough time, I would say from probably maybe even younger than middle school, but through high school and college on just getting faster and stronger. I've we've seen some baseline numbers as to strength levels that players need to have to play at the next level to play Division I baseball. There isn't a set standard for mechanics. Everybody's different, but yet we spend all our time with mechanics.
Liam, I've heard you talk about before, and I'm probably, I might mess this up, of like pull resistance, or like when talking about like how strong a player should be, to
Yeah.
understand if you know. I hope you know what I'm getting at. But I was listening to you, and I know, Micah, you actually talked about, like, that's why like doing curls and like things like that don't necessarily increase any power. But Liam, what specific, like, how would you actually test that, and what exactly were you talking about, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, so it's whatever I'm swinging, baseball bat or golf club, think about, I want to take a look at, how far away is the center of mass of the object, from my center of rotation from my body. What's the mass of the object and what's the rotational speed? And so it's pretty simple calculation there to actually calculate the G forces is the outward pulling force, and then convert that back into, well, I'm from Canada, so I'm very comfortable in the metric world, but down here we then convert it back to pounds. And that essentially lets us know, like, what is the outward pulling force of the object, which then lets us know if we want to have stable rotation, how hard do we have to be pulling back on it. So, one of the feels we'll talk about with golfers at times, especially when they have early extension or the baseball equivalent of losing space, in golf, we'll talk about them trying to pull the grip off the shaft. So in golf, by the time we get where the club shaft is, about parallel to the ground, all the force that the golfer is exerting on it is really just pulling back to the center. Right, so they're pulling in line with the longitudinal axis of the club. So in baseball, I kind of referenced this earlier, while the implement is shorter and it's not moving as fast, it is so much heavier. The total weight of a golf club driver is typically just under 1 pound. We get up into 31, 32 ounce baseball bats. That's why it requires, so much more strength to move at speed. And I think, even going back to grip strength, where grip strength is so important is that's the link between the bat and the body. And so even if you have tremendous rotary speed, but your grip strength is too low, you're not going to be able to actually channel that energy the body is creating out to the bat. You're just going to leak. Where grip strength, where I think there's a little bit of a myth about grip strength in baseball, is that higher grip strength will give better performance on poor contacted hits. And working with Dr. McKenzie, one of the things, that we've learned from him is, I guess the reason as to why that's false is the contact interval between bat and ball is not enough time for the impulse of contact to travel back down to the hands and have any effect on bat movement through the contact point.
That's interesting. Very interesting. Micah, I mean, this past year, I started to see some more players swing without a knob. Like, it was just shaved off completely at the bottom. I don't know if you guys were the ones who started getting guys to do that, but was there, like, what's the thought behind that?
I was just saying, you're referring to like the mask that was underneath the hands.
Yeah.
So Liam kind of came up with the name for that. We had a bunch of different variations early on of that mask that was underneath to counterweight the weight of the bat, to make it swing like a lighter bat, even though the weight was heavier. So he named it the hockey puck. It kind of looks like a little hockey puck there under their hands. But yeah, so I think the first person to take it into a game was that Jock Peterson?
Yeah.
And then over time, we've had a few more guys fit for it and use it for different scenarios and take it into games. And then obviously, I think you saw there in the postseason him passing it around and using it. A couple other guys using it, but yeah, that was just a way to kind of help offset some of that weight. But Liam can also take that a little further too.
Yeah, I mean I look at it as it's more than anything, it changes the center of mass of the bat. right? So it's a mechanism where we can pull the center of the mass, even closer to the hands, which for certain players, it's a great match with their, with their setup and their intent. The players it works for, it works very, very well. And, there's times when we put it into people's hands in the fitting environment and it's crazy how bad it is. Like really bad.
Well, I mean, Liam, they don't call you the mad scientist for nothing. I mean, you're out here creating this kind of stuff. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, we just make stuff up and hope it works. I mean, the fun part is at least like, we've got such a cool environment to do all this stuff in. When it doesn't work, it doesn't work. It doesn't matter. Like, it's just, hey, let's try it. Oh, well, what the biggest thing we learned there? Let's never do that again.
Hey, fails, first attempt in learning,
Absolutely. Yep.
Is there anything specific or anything that you guys are looking into now or trying right now that you're like, this may be something cool?
I'd say some stuff with handle diameter.
Okay. I like it. I like it.
Oh, Micah, you're on mute there.
Yeah, no, I would say, yeah, few things handle grip related. Could be pretty interesting. We're testing, but hopefully we'll have a year to test it and see.
Where can people find out like more information? I know I was on your guys' website and I'll put the link up in the show notes. Because I know you guys got some video content online for people who can't, make the trip down to Louisiana. So I think I was looking at some of the stuff. It's really cool.
We've got, we've got a YouTube channel up there. We've got back into construction, and late last season, we've fallen off a little bit on the content creation. So we'll get back on that. Yeah, we've got a few podcast episodes we put out. If you go to, and I can send you this for the show notes, if you actually go to courses.mygolflab.ca, we do have some free baseball education stuff, just talking about what is BPI, and there's a couple other programs about building speed and stuff there that people can check out.
Awesome. Well, Micah, Liam, I appreciate you guys coming on today. Fantastic information. It really is fascinating, and keep up the great work, man. You guys are pushing the game forward. Clearly, I mean, I haven't seen anybody else do any of this stuff, so it's really cool to see.
I appreciate that.
Appreciate you having us on. Yeah.